Next time you throw a cheap hot dog on the grill, I really want you to look closely at how it browns. You might think, oh, I'm getting this perfect savory sear on a nice piece of meat.
Right, but you actually aren't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What you're actually watching is basically a lab-engineered chemical reaction. It's just added sugar caramelizing to hide an absolute ocean of salt.
Yeah, it's a visual trick. And honestly, it's just one of dozens of illusions hiding inside a product that we completely take for granted.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Looking through the huge stack of research you shared with us, we've broken down 14 major American hot dog brands.
And we've got 7 that you should probably avoid at all costs, and 7 that actually get it right.
Right. So our mission today is to sort of tear away the packaging and explore the hidden economics, the food science, and the surprising health realities lurking inside that bun.
Because, this is so much bigger than just making a better grocery list.
Oh, for sure. It's a masterclass in how ultra-processed food engineering fundamentally alters the very definition of the word meat.
Yeah, when you strip away the bright logos and actually examine the supply chain, you're left with a very stark contrast in how our food is manufactured. And really, what we are willing to accept as fuel for our bodies.
Let's start at the absolute bottom of the barrel, the budget tier. We're looking at brands like Great Value. You see the price tag on these, and your first thought is just, how is it economically possible to sell protein this cheaply?
Well, to get the price that low, you have to completely change the input. I mean, it's a pure math problem.
Okay, so what's the variable they're changing?
With a brand like Great Value, that so-called meat is mostly mechanically separated chicken.
Wow, okay, mechanically separated sounds incredibly clinical. Paint a picture for me here. What is actually happening in that factory?
Okay, so picture the leftover frame of a chicken after all the primary cuts, like the breasts and the thighs, have been removed.
Right, the stuff you'd normally just make stock out of.
Exactly. You have bones with bits of meat, cartilage, and skin still attached. Instead of letting that go to waste, machines take those carcasses and blast them through a high-pressure screen.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense.
No, it is. The pressure essentially forces all the soft tissues through these microscopic holes in the screen, leaving the larger bone fragments behind.
So you aren't getting a cut of meat at all. You're getting this scraped off, emulsified paste. It's essentially a budget meat smoothie.
That is a very accurate, if unsettling, way to describe it.
But wait, chicken paste doesn't naturally taste like a traditional hot dog. How do they compensate for that completely bland base?
With massive, and I mean massive amounts of sodium and chemical flavorings, a single Great Value Frank contains about 600 milligrams of sodium.
Hold on, 600 milligrams
Yep.
in one single hot dog.
Yep. Just one.
So if you eat 2 of those at a backyard barbecue, you basically hit your cardiovascular limit for the entire day.
Pretty much. And they pump that paste full of water and dill fillers. That's why when you put them on a grill, they don't sear nicely. They sort of puff up, they swell, and the inside turns to absolute mush.
Ugh, that textural nightmare.
Right. And to cover up that textural disaster, they just blast it with liquid chemical smoke and nitrates.
Let's talk about those nitrates, because that moves us from just cheap and gross to potentially dangerous. The research points specifically to Armour here.
Yes, the classic blue and yellow pack.
Right, the one that relies really heavily on nostalgia. But they use sodium nitrite to lock in that bright neon pink color.
Because real meat naturally turns gray or brown when it's cooked or cured, the nitrites freeze it in that artificial pink state.
But the color isn't the real issue, is it?
No, it's not. The problem is what happens when those nitrites hit the high direct heat of a backyard grill. The intense heat causes a chemical conversion, basically turning those nitrites into nitrosamines.
And what exactly are nitrosamines? For those of us who aren't food chemists,
They are chemical compounds that extensive, peer-reviewed studies have linked to an increased risk of cancer.
wow.
Yeah. You take that risk, pair it with the incredibly high saturated fat in these products, and it's just a physiological nightmare.
But coming back to the sugar, because this is where the formulation gets truly deceptive.
Yeah.
You look at the ingredients for these budget franks, and you see corn syrup and dextrose.
Which is fascinating.
It makes zero sense to me. Why are they putting sugar and corn syrup into meat? A hot dog shouldn't be sweet.
Well, it's not actually there for sweetness. It's a structural necessity for their formula. Remember that massive salt load we just talked about?
The 600 milligrams, yeah.
Right. If you ate that meat paste with just the salt, your palate would reject it entirely. It would be inedible. The sugar is basically there to balance the salt, effectively tricking your tongue.
That's insidious.
And it goes further. Sugars like dextrose artificially enhance browning. Because that mechanically separated batter lacks the natural muscle proteins to actually sear and create a true Maillard reaction on a grill, the added sugar caramelizes instead.
Ah, so it mimics the visual cue of a perfectly grilled piece of meat.
Exactly, it's a complete sensory illusion.
That is wild. It really makes me think of the consumer backlash against Gwaltney that was in the source material. People who bought that brand for years suddenly noticed a shift in the quality.
Yeah, they started complaining online about this bizarre, really tough casing surrounding a soft processed center.
Right, because when a company pushes cost-cutting to the absolute extreme, you get those weird sensory mismatches.
A natural casing should have a nice snap, but an artificial one gets tough and leathery, while the inside remains that mushy emulsion we talked about.
And my favorite complaint from the data, they lay a Gwaltney dog on a standard bun, and the ratio is totally off. It's significantly smaller, leaving you eating mostly bread.
Which just makes it feel completely engineered, not butchered.
Exactly. But, a bad bread-to-meat ratio is just an annoyance. Where this mass industrial processing gets genuinely frightening is when that poor quality becomes a physical safety issue. Let's look at Sugardale.
Yeah, Sugardale really illustrates how the texture of ultra-processed food can become a mechanical liability.
Because pediatric safety groups constantly warn that hot dogs are a primary choking hazard for children under 4.
Right, but Sugardale presents a unique danger because of its incredibly dense, totally uniform build.
Because it's an emulsion, right? When you slice it, you get these firm, unbreakable little coins. It doesn't flake or shred like a piece of real steak or chicken would.
Precisely. If a toddler swallows a slice whole, that dense, rubbery coin creates a perfect, airtight seal right over their airway. Doesn't break down easily.
That is terrifying.
It really is. That structural rigidity is a direct consequence of binding that cheap meat paste so tightly, and that's before we even touch on their sourcing.
Oh, right, the livestock practices.
Yeah, they use conventional livestock, relying heavily on antibiotics and growth promoters to manage disease in crowded conditions. The CDC is constantly tracking how this routine agricultural antibiotic use is linked to rising antimicrobial resistance in humans.
So it's literally a chain reaction starting at the feedlot. Let's pivot, though, to something that really shocked me in this research.
Yeah.
It's easy to see why the budget brands cut corners. But what about a brand with legendary old world status, like Vienna beef?
Ah, the Chicago street cart icon.
Right. It is practically folklore at this point. Yet in 2019, Vienna beef suffered a massive recall. We're talking over 2,000 pounds of product pulled from shelves because of potential metal fragments in the meat.
Yeah, that was a huge deal.
How does a brand with a century of heritage end up with metal in the grinder?
It reveals this really fascinating split in corporate identity, and it challenges the false sense of security we get when we see a familiar logo.
What do you mean by a split identity?
Well, the hot dog you buy from a stadium cart might be produced under one set of strict standards, but the retail packs sitting in your local grocery store are often a totally different story. In Vienna beef's case, those retail packs aren't even kosher certified.
Wait, really? Which means they bypass the stricter supervised slaughter and processing controls that kosher certification demands.
Exactly. People just assume the logo guarantees the process, but it doesn't. And to add insult to injury, those retail links are packing over 500 milligrams of sodium each.
So a legendary reputation doesn't automatically protect your supply chain from mechanical failures or, recipe compromises.
Not at all. It's a tough lesson for consumers.
And to understand how extreme those factory failures can get, we just have to look at the 2016 Bar S recall. Over 180 tons of product pulled because of listeria fears.
Just massive scale contamination.
But honestly, even if we set the bacterial contamination aside, the texture panels on Bar S are hard to stomach. Reviewers literally compared the mouthfeel to hot dog-flavored mousse.
Mousse is an incredibly accurate description, and it all comes back to the manufacturing process.
How does water and meat paste turn into a mousse, though? That sounds bizarre.
Well, think about what happens when you put water and protein into an industrial blender. When they blast those scraps through the high-pressure screens and aggressively mix in the water and fillers, they are literally whipping air into the protein matrix.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the meat loses all of its natural resistance and chew. It becomes an aerated foam that just happens to taste like salt and artificial smoke.
Hot dog-flavored mousse. I'm never going to unhear that. Okay, so we've covered the dangerous and the structurally bizarre. Let's look at the middle ground.
The brands that aren't necessarily dangerous but are just disappointing.
Yeah, ballpark. This feels like the ultimate Sure, why not backyard option?
It really is the definition of the American middle tier. Tasting panels constantly dock it for being bland and underspiced.
But where it really fails is the thermodynamics on the grill, which is so frustrating. The whole point of a hot dog is that it's low effort. You throw it on the heat and grab a drink.
Exactly, it's supposed to be easy.
But with ballpark, the research shows the skins split, they bubble, they blister completely unevenly. You basically have to hover over the grill with tongs just to keep them from exploding. Why do they fall apart so easily?
It's a complete failure of the casing and the emulsion. When the water and fat inside that dog heat up, they expand rapidly.
Makes sense. Heat causes expansion.
Right. A natural casing can handle that expansion, but the artificial casings and cheap binders used in ballpark just can't contain the pressure. The structural integrity fails and they rupture.
Which provides the perfect contrast to what we're seeing in the clean label rebellion. Let's look at Applegate Naturals. The difference here is night and day.
Completely different philosophy.
They use 100% grass-fed, pasture-raised cattle, no antibiotics, no added hormones, and the ingredient list is just incredibly short. Beef, water, sea salt, garlic, paprika, onion.
It's as simple as it gets.
Yeah, it's Whole30, it's gluten-free, and the sources emphasize that it's casein-free.
Casein is a really interesting detail to point out.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. What is casein, and why is it hiding in hot dogs to begin with?
So casein is a protein naturally found in milk. Budget meat processors use it as a cheap binder. It acts like glue to hold all that water and emulsified meat paste together.
Oh, so it's literal dairy glue in your meat.
Basically. By being casein-free, Applegate is signaling that their meat has enough natural structural integrity that it doesn't need dairy glue to hold its shape.
That makes total sense. Trader Joe's takes a very similar approach, right? They source organic, grass-fed beef from green pastures, not crowded dirt feedlots.
Yes, and they don't use any chemical preservatives.
But I have a theory about this.
Huh.
Do we only appreciate the clean flavor of an Applegate or Trader Joe's Frank because our palates have been completely numbed by the heavy salt and fake smoke of the cheaper brands? Like, is it just the contrast that makes them taste good?
It's a fair question. But no, it's not just the contrast. It's the underlying chemistry. When you remove the heavy sodium, the corn syrup, and the artificial smoke, you aren't just taking away bad things, you're actually allowing the natural beef flavor to step forward.
And because it's grass-fed beef, it actually has a different lipid profile, right? Wait, what does a different lipid profile mean for the actual taste on my tongue?
Well, grass-fed cattle produce fats that have different melting points and a much richer, more complex flavor than grain-fed cattle. So when that fat renders on the grill, it coats your palate differently.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you don't need dextrose to fake a sear because the natural proteins and fats caramelize beautifully on their own. Real food chemistry naturally outperforms lab-engineered textures.
And according to the tasting panels, they deliver that satisfying audible crunch, which brings us to the holy grail of this deep dive, the science of the snap.
The snap is everything.
Let's examine Boar's Head. They have been using the same recipe since 1905. It's USDA choice beef, a solid 7 grams of protein per link, and they cure it with celery powder instead of synthetic chemical nitrates.
The celery powder is a great natural source of nitrites, allowing them to cure the meat safely without the synthetic chemical additives. But the real star of the Boar's Head construction is the natural sheep casing.
The research dives deep into this. The casing is what creates that legendary snap. Right?
Yes, and the mechanics of it are absolutely fascinating. A natural sheep casing acts like a miniature pressure vessel.
Okay, break that down for me.
When you put it on the grill, the intense heat causes the juices and the fats inside the hot dog to expand, building up all this internal pressure. But at the exact same time, the heat causes the proteins in the natural casing to shrink and tighten.
So you have the inside aggressively pushing out while the outside is pulling in.
Exactly. It creates this incredible surface tension. The casing holds all those boiling juices perfectly intact until the exact millisecond your teeth break the surface.
And that sudden release of tension is what creates that loud gourmet snap.
Precisely. It is a thermodynamic feat that skinless, mass-produced Franks just cannot replicate.
I love that. A hot dog as a thermodynamic pressure vessel. But, you know, I can already hear the pushback from people listening. Sure, Boar's Head and Applegate sound amazing, but I'm throwing a barbecue for 20 people. I cannot afford to buy premium, grass-fed organic beef for a backyard party.
And that's a very valid concern for a lot of families.
Right. Does avoiding the meat smoothie mean you automatically have to empty your wallet?
Absolutely not. And this is where Kirkland's signature completely disrupts the entire market model.
Ah, the legendary Costco food court pedigree. $1.50 for a hot dog and a soda.
Right. Kirkland proves that you don't need a luxury price tag to escape the ultra-processed trap. Their retail packs bring that exact same food court quality straight to your fridge.
And what's actually in them?
They use 100% USDA-inspected beef. They use zero byproducts, no corn syrup, and no fillers to pad the weight. It's just a clean grind with garlic and paprika that gives a really nice, light, smoky finish.
But how do they keep the cost so low if they aren't blasting bones through screens? That doesn't seem to make economic sense.
It comes down to vertical integration. Costco manufactures them entirely in-house.
Oh, so they own the whole process.
Yes. By controlling the entire supply chain from the slaughterhouse to the packaging line, they eliminate all the middlemen. It proves that high quality is entirely possible at a massive scale, provided the company refuses to treat meat as a vessel for cheap commodity fillers.
Which leads us to our final category, the absolute pinnacle of heritage. We talked earlier about Armour using their blue and yellow packaging to sell a fake manufactured nostalgia.
Right, nostalgia that hides a highly processed chemical formula.
Exactly. But there are brands that offer true culinary time travel, brands with incredibly strict oversight and unchanged recipes. Let's look at Hebrew National.
Hebrew National's reputation is entirely built on the Triangle K kosher certification, which they have rigorously maintained since 1905.
And that symbol isn't just a marketing gimmick, is it?
Not at all. It represents intense third-party oversight of the entire production process. They use only premium beef cuts.
And the research points out that you can literally smell the difference. The smell of the grill smoke is basically a lie detector.
It really is.
If you cook a budget brand, the smoke smells acrid like artificial flavorings and burning corn syrup. But when Hebrew National hits the grates, the smoke smells purely of beef and disciplined spices. Just garlic and paprika.
And then you have Sabret, which is the quintessential New York City sidewalk cart experience. They use select cuts of all beef, and they stubbornly stick to that natural sheep casing.
Because of that structural integrity we discussed earlier with the pressure vessel.
Yes, exactly. A Sabret can handle the harsh, dirty water boil of a street cart or a high-heat char on a grill without turning to mush. It retains that sharp snap.
And we have to end this countdown with the undisputed king of Coney Island, Nathan's Famous. Born in 1916, 100% beef, no byproducts, and a perfectly balanced smoke note.
They have unmatched structural integrity on the grill, too, holding all those juices inside the natural casing while taking on the perfect char.
To me, looking at Nathan's brings this entire deep dive into focus. Real nostalgia isn't about a logo you remember from your childhood. True nostalgia is a recipe that literally has not degraded in 100 years.
I think the broader takeaway here is that the brands that survive a century without losing consumer trust all share one specific philosophy. They treat their product as actual meat.
Imagine that.
Right. They aren't running lab experiments to see how much water, sugar, and gristle they can legally bind together with casein and chemicals. They start with real beef, they season it simply, and they trust the process. Because when the beef is real, the grill doesn't lie.
It really doesn't. So let's zoom out and look at the massive chasm we've explored today. On one side, you have hot dog-flavored mousse, leftover chicken frames blasted through high-pressure screens, pumped full of sodium, bound with milk proteins, and dyed with nitrates, just waiting to puff up into an explosive mush on your grill.
And on the other side, you have grass-fed, clean-label beef, seasoned with simple spices, wrapped in natural casings that snap beautifully under the heat.
The contrast in how those two products are engineered is staggering. And when you stand in that grocery aisle looking at a wall of brands, it's hard to know if you're buying meat or a chemistry experiment. But every single pack you grab is a vote.
It is a choice.
It's choice between feeding your family an ultra-processed chemical puzzle or supporting companies that refuse to compromise on tradition and health.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final concept to chew on. In food science, there is a psychological phenomenon known as sensory deception.
Sensory deception.
Yes. For decades, the cheap mass-market brands have used chemical smoke, added sugar, and massive sodium loads to fundamentally hijack our brain's reward centers. Think of it like a soundboard. They're turning the salt and smoke dials all the way up to 11 to completely drown out the fact that the quality meat channel is muted.
Wow.
They trick your nervous system into thinking you are consuming a dense, savory, nutrient-rich protein. So the next time you find yourself craving this kind of comfort food, I want you to ask yourself a serious question. Are you genuinely craving the food itself? Or has your palate just been conditioned over the years to crave the lab-engineered flavor profile that was specifically designed to mimic it? Can your taste buds actually relearn to appreciate reality?
Wow. That is the question, isn't it? Because the next time you fire up the grill for a simple, carefree backyard barbecue, you need to remember you do not have to settle for the budget meat smoothie. You can choose the chemistry of real food instead.